He was fired for touching the princess, but only he saw the truth in her skin, HFY. The palace of the Aurelian Empire floated above the capital world like a piece of living art. White gold spires curved toward the sky, and light from 3 suns reflected off crystal walls. Inside, thousands of guests gathered for a ceremony that would be remembered across the galaxy. Among nobles, diplomats, and military leaders stood a human named Elias Trent. He did not belong there. Elias wore a plain uniform, darker and simpler than everyone else's. No jewels, no flowing robes, just a small badge on his chest that marked him as a technical safety specialist. Humans were often hired for such work. They were good with systems, patient with details, and cheap compared to other species. No one looked at him twice. Elias stood near the edge of the grand hall, eyes moving quietly over sensor readings displayed on a thin wrist panel. His job was simple: monitor environmental stability during the ceremony. Temperature, radiation, atmospheric balance. If something went wrong, he was to alert palace systems. He was not here to speak. He was not here to act. The ceremony was about to begin. A hush spread through the hall as the great doors opened. Royal guards stepped aside and Princess Valith entered. She was everything the Empire admired. Tall, graceful, her skin shimmered with soft patterns that flowed like slow-moving light beneath a pale surface. To her people, those patterns were sacred, a sign of royal blood and divine favor. Guests bowed. Some placed hands over their hearts, others lowered their eyes in respect. Elias looked up and froze. At first he thought it was a sensor glitch. He blinked and adjusted the contrast on his wrist display. Then he looked again with his own eyes. The patterns on the princess's skin were wrong. They were beautiful, yes, but not natural. Elias had spent years studying biological support systems for dozens of species. He had seen living skin respond to heat, light, emotion, and stress. What he saw now did not match any known biological reaction. The patterns were too regular, too controlled. They moved like a response, not decoration. His wrist panel suddenly chimed softly, a silent alert. Elias glanced down. Cellular flux, rising. That should not happen during a simple walk. Elias' heart beat faster. He scanned again. Radiation levels were normal, temperature steady. No toxins in the air, but the princess's biosignature, what little he was allowed to monitor, was shifting. She's being affected by something, Elias whispered to himself. The ceremony continued. The High Chancellor stepped forward, beginning a long speech about unity and destiny. The princess stood still, hands folded, expression calm, but Elias saw it. A brief tightening of her fingers, a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. The patterns on her arm darkened for half a second, then smoothed out again. Elias swallowed. Protocol screamed at him to stay where he was. Humans were not allowed to approach royalty. Touching a royal without permission was one of the highest offenses in the Empire. But if he was wrong, nothing would happen. If he was right, and he did nothing. His wrist panel flashed again, cellular instability increasing. Elias was close now, close enough to see the fine texture of the princess's skin. The patterns were not just light. They were layered beneath the surface like something alive pressing outward. He lifted his hand. Just one touch, he told himself, just enough to confirm. His fingers brushed her forearm. The reaction was immediate. The patterns flared sharply, twisting into jagged lines. The princess gasped, her breath catching. Her eyes widened not in anger but in shock. Guards moved instantly. Weapons hummed to life. Elias was slammed to the floor before he could even speak. His wrist panel shattered under a boot. "How dare you?" a guard shouted in a sharp, alien tone. "I'm sorry," Elias said quickly, breath knocked from his lungs. "I had to. Something's wrong." "I am a medical systems engineer," Elias said, forcing the words out. "Her skin shows abnormal cellular behavior. There is an external influence." Not offended, afraid. That look gave Elias the courage to keep speaking. "She's not well," he said louder. "The patterns aren't natural. They react to contact because they're not part of her biology. They're imposed." The High Chancellor raised a hand and the hall quieted. "You were hired to watch machines," he said. "Not to touch royalty, not to speak lies. Your service is terminated. You will leave this world within one cycle." Elias was thrown onto the landing platform like unwanted cargo. His identification badge was tossed after him. "Go," a guard said, "and be grateful we show mercy." Hours later, aboard a civilian shuttle bound for the human sector, Elias replayed the moment again and again in his mind. The feel of her skin was wrong, too warm in places, cold in others, like something responding, testing, not skin, an interface. He reached into his bag and pulled out a backup data shard, small, easy to hide. He had not been supposed to record anything. But habit had made him mirror his sensor feed. The data was incomplete, but it was enough. Elias closed his eyes as the shuttle jumped to faster than light. He was fired, disgraced, labeled a criminal, but he was certain of one thing: the Empire was blind, and the princess was in danger. The human sector station was old, crowded, and loud. It drifted at the edge of imperial space, far from shining palaces and sacred ceremonies. This was where humans were sent when they were no longer useful or when they caused trouble. Elias Trent sat alone in a narrow rented room, lights dim, the hum of the station vibrating through the metal walls. A small table held his tools, a cracked data reader, and the backup shard he had hidden during the ceremony. He had been there for 3 days. 3 days since he had touched the princess. 3 days since his career ended. Elias had not slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the patterns on her skin flare and twist. He felt again the strange resistance beneath his fingers, like touching something that pretended to be flesh. Now he was certain. It was not natural. He slid the data shard into the reader. The screen flickered, then stabilized. Lines of raw sensor data filled the display. Incomplete, noisy, and fragmented, but real. Elias leaned forward, focus sharpening. He filtered environmental noise first, then background radiation, then palace systems interference. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. His breath slowed. Cellular activity graphs rose and fell in unnatural waves. The pattern was rhythmic, almost deliberate, not random mutation, not illness. "This is a rewrite," Elias murmured. He cross-referenced it with archived medical data from other species. Long-term genetic drift. Cultural myths about ascension. Reports that ended abruptly or were sealed behind diplomatic restrictions. A chill ran through him. It was not only the princess. There were hints, faint but consistent, that members of the royal line had been changing for centuries, always slowly, always framed as sacred evolution. But the data showed something else: an external intelligence. Something embedded deep within the biology, dormant at first, then active. Learning, adjusting, a parasite. Not the mindless kind that fed and spread blindly. This one was careful, patient, smart. Elias sat back, hands trembling slightly. If this thing completed whatever cycle it was following, it would not stop with one species. The Empire ruled dozens of worlds. Trade routes touched hundreds more. If the royal family fell under its control, the galaxy would follow. Elias laughed once quietly, a tired, bitter sound. "And they fired me," he said to the empty room. He compiled his findings into a basic report. No accusations, just data, models, and probabilities. He sent it to 3 imperial medical councils and 2 scientific institutes. All were rejected within minutes. One reply was especially brief: human clearance insufficient, prior misconduct noted, further contact discouraged. Elias clenched his jaw. To them he was not a whistleblower, he was a problem. Hours passed. The station lights shifted to night cycle. Elias stared at the screen, mind racing. If official channels were closed, he needed another way. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Incoming message. Elias frowned. He was not expecting anyone. He tapped the screen. The message contained no name, no origin marker, just text. "You were right." Elias' pulse spiked. Another line appeared. "I can feel it moving now." His fingers hovered over the screen. "Who is this?" he typed. There was a pause, long enough to make his breath catch. Then the reply came, I am afraid, and no one will listen to me, not even my own thoughts. Elias swallowed hard, Princess Valeth. He stood up, pacing the small room. How are you contacting me? He typed. Through a relay I was not meant to access. It responds to me now. I do not know why. That answer terrified him more than anything else. The parasite was already helping her reach out. Elias forced himself to stay calm. What do you feel? He asked. Pain sometimes, pressure beneath my skin, and silence. Moments where my thoughts feel distant like echoes. Elias closed his eyes. It's not supposed to be there, he typed. It's not part of you. I know, came the reply. When you touched me, it reacted, like it noticed you, like it noticed me noticing it. That matched his theory. The parasite responded to external awareness. It did not like being observed. Elias sat back down. Listen carefully, he typed. You need to avoid direct activation. Emotional stress, strong sensory input, those may accelerate it. Another pause. I cannot avoid the ceremony schedule, the princess replied. They are increasing my appearances. They say the patterns are becoming more blessed. His hands shook now, not from fear but from urgency. He was fired, stranded, powerless. And yet the most important person in the empire had just asked for his help. Over the next 2 days, fragments of data arrived, small packets hidden inside routine communications. Elias worked non-stop, building models, refining simulations. The picture grew clearer and worse. The parasite was not just rewriting cells. It was integrating with neural pathways, enhancing perception, increasing influence, preparing the host to accept guidance, control. Once complete, the host would believe the thoughts were their own. Elias ran a simulation forward. Estimated time to full activation, less than 1 standard year. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. They didn't have time. He reached out to other humans now, quietly, carefully, old colleagues, disgraced researchers, military medics who had seen strange things on distant worlds. At first there was silence. Then one reply, I thought I was the only one who noticed. Then another, we saw something similar on a border colony. They told us to erase the data. Within a day, Elias had a small network. No official backing, no funding, just shared concern and stubborn human refusal to look away. They met in encrypted channels, exchanging data and theories. This thing adapts, said a woman named Kara, a xenobiologist. It learns the host's culture. That's why it survives so long. Silence followed. This is big, someone said finally, bigger than we can handle. It might work, Kara said slowly, but we need direct access to a host. Hold on, he typed. We are working on a way to help you. You should not risk yourself for me, she replied. They will punish you again. Elias stared at the words. Already did, he typed back. This time it's worth it. The connection faded. Elias sat alone in the dim room, surrounded by data and half-built hope. The Empire had cast him out, but humanity was quietly moving. And for the first time, the parasite was no longer alone in the dark. The device was ugly. That was Elias' first thought as he stared at the projected model hovering above the table. It was not elegant like imperial technology. No smooth curves or glowing symbols. Just layered metal rings, exposed wiring, and a core that pulsed softly with contained energy. Human-made. It won't win any awards, Kara said through the secure link. Her face looked tired, eyes red from lack of sleep. But the math holds. They were fired, reassigned, ignored, or buried under paperwork. But they were here. The field will destabilize the parasite's interface layer, Kara continued. Only for a few seconds, long enough to force it into a defensive state. Elias answered before Kara could. Minimal, temporary pain, confusion, nothing permanent. The reply came almost instantly. They are watching me more closely now. Elias expected that. The device is nearly complete, he wrote. But I need access, physical access. That humans are questioning sacred truth. They want an example. Elias exhaled slowly. A trial meant attention. Attention meant witnesses. When, he typed, 2 cycles. Elias smiled faintly. Good, he wrote. That gives us a stage. Tiered seating rose in wide arcs, filled with nobles, officials, and representatives from allied worlds. This was not justice, it was theater. Elias stood alone at the center platform, hands free but surrounded by invisible restraint fields. He wore no uniform now, just simple clothes. Human clothes. Across from him, elevated and distant, sat the High Chancellor. Elias Trent, the Chancellor said, voice echoing. You are charged with violating sacred protocol, spreading falsehoods, and attempting to undermine imperial unity. And yet you continue to interfere. The patterns on her skin glowed brighter than before, flowing in complex designs that drew gasps from the crowd. Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. It's accelerating, he thought. She took her place beside the Chancellor, hands folded. Princess, the Chancellor said gently, do you confirm that this human touched you without consent? Yes, she said. Elias closed his eyes briefly. I also confirm, she continued, that his touch caused discomfort. Let truth be heard. It is an intelligence, a parasite. Light fractured into sharp angles, no longer beautiful, no longer flowing. A dark shape pressed visibly beneath her skin, moving against the surface like something trying to escape. Screams filled the chamber. Sensors went wild. Displays flared with alerts. This is impossible, the Chancellor whispered. The princess staggered, clutching her arm. It hurts, she said, voice shaking. But I can think clearly. Her voice was stronger now. He has not lied. Delegates shouted, guards argued. Emergency councils were called on the spot. The tribunal dissolved into confusion. Through it all, Elias stood still. He had come expecting prison. Instead, he had brought doubt. Later, in a quiet chamber far from the noise, Elias sat across from Princess Valeth. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clearer than before. It is quieter now, she said. Inside my head. Because one human had refused to look away. And the truth, once seen, could not be unseen. The Empire did not sleep after the tribunal. Across the capital world, emergency lights glowed through the night cycle. Councils met behind sealed doors. Data flowed between systems at a speed usually reserved for war. What had been revealed in public could not be erased, no matter how much some wished it could. Elias Trent was no longer a prisoner. He was also not free. He sat in a secure medical chamber, simple but clean, guarded quietly from the outside. No restraints, no threats, just watchful silence. Humans were often treated this way when others did not yet know what to do with them. Princess Valeth lay on a nearby medical bed, surrounded by scanners. The patterns on her skin still glowed, but they flickered now, uneven and unstable. Doctors spoke in low voices, uncertain and afraid. Elias watched the data scroll across the screens. The parasite is adapting, he said calmly, but it's weakened. It didn't expect resistance. You speak of it like an enemy. You should come too. The entity exists, not only in the royal line but in varying stages across multiple systems. We burn infected worlds if we must. And it works. That too. Allowed to go where needed, without political interference. Not as servants, but as specialists, as problem solvers. The process was slow and careful. The field activated. The parasite revealed itself. Humans adjusted, watched, responded. Every case was different. Every life mattered. There were failures. There was fear, but there was progress. Elias moved constantly from ship to ship, world to world. He slept little, ate when he remembered. He watched humans do what they had always done best, adapt under pressure, care under risk, and refuse to give up. On one distant world, a governor knelt in gratitude after his child was freed. On another, a whole population watched in silence as the truth surfaced beneath their skin and was finally named. The parasite fought back. It whispered. It resisted. It tried to turn hosts against their healers. It failed because humans talked to their patients, explained, listened, stayed. Months passed, the spread slowed, then stopped. Princess Valeth's recovery became a symbol. The patterns on her skin faded to a gentle glow, no longer dominant, no longer in control. She met Elias one last time before returning to public life. "They offered you a title," she said, "a seat among the stars. We just reminded it to look." They were not the oldest. They were not the most elegant. They were the ones who touched the truth when others looked away. And when the galaxy's skin hid a lie, humanity was the species that felt it and refused to let go.